Mr. Gunnar Franklin Reed, third grader at Hamilton Heights, fourth year Cub Scout from Pack 103 in Cicero, is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reed. Mr. Reed, did you help out with the White River cleanup last fall? Yes. I wanted to thank you for that. That was a great project. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
So before we do the roll call, just want to remind you, seating is limited to 25 people. The public call-in number is 1-469-998-6201. When you're prompted, enter the following conference code, 342-631-867#. All right, we'll do that again. Public call-in number is 1-469-998-6201. When you're prompted, enter the following conference ID, 342-631-867#. Ms. Lees, would you call the order? The roll.
Present.
Mr. Boyce?
Present.
Mr. Davis?
Present.
Mr. O'Connor?
Present.
Mr. Schwartz?
Present.
Mr. Smith?
Present.
Ms. Wiles?
Present.
Mr. Hampton? Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. I need approval of the executive session memorandum from January 12th, 2020.
I move approval.
Second.
The hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you. I need approval of the minutes from the January 12th, 2020 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Hand vote also. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Approval of the agenda.
Mr. President, I would like to amend the agenda to move miscellaneous items number 1, 2, and 3 to take place after the approval of the claims.
Second.
Second. Hand vote. All those in favor of amending the agenda? Need approval to approve the agenda as amended.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
This is a hand vote. All those in favor? Petitions by citizens who are present. I have not received any cards. However, we have the Honorable Senator Baldwin. Where did he go?
He's in the back.
He's in the crowd again this evening.
Behind the mask.
Mr. President, councilors, Mayor, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak again today. Not much has happened since I last talked to you. We took a week off, and there was a police car sitting in front of my house for a week. Thank you to the public safety director for that. Nothing terrible happened. So, but had a few pieces of pro-police legislation that one of which I was able to get through committee today. And the Senate continues to work on an immunity bill, Senate Bill 1, that if you have any questions about, I'm happy to answer. There's also legislation in regards to executive orders that's being kicked around. We continue to debate about that. There's several bills in both the House and the Senate that deal with varying degrees of restraint that may be applied at the executive level for what orders may come out and how they affect Hoosiers, and whether the legislature can effectively be called back into session automatically or call itself back into session. The things that are in debate right now are the length of those, that initial period of time that the governor is able to enact an emergency order, whether he can automatically extend it, whether the legislature can automatically come back into session or not. So that's being debated right now widely in the Senate. There's about 1,000 bills that have been entered between the Senate and the House. Just a lot of legislation out there. So if anybody has a specific question, please reach out. I'm happy to answer questions tonight, or if you want to hit me on if any citizen wants to send me an email. You can send an email to s20@iga.in.gov. You can also see what legislation I'm working on your behalf by just going to iga.in.gov and then navigating to me, Scott Baldwin, as a legislator. If there's anything in there that you want to hear about, I'm happy to answer questions both by email or by phone. I'm easy to get a hold of. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you may have, Mr. President.
Any questions for Mr. Ball?
Thank you.
For being here.
Yeah, thanks.
Anybody, Mr. Yost, anybody on the line who would like to speak? Thank you. If you do would like to speak, there's a comment cards out front. You can fill it out and hand it to the clerk. Council committee reports. We have Parks.
Yes, Mr. President. The Parks Board met January 14th. Welcomed 2 new members, Dr. Joe Forgy and, hopefully I pronounce this right, Rebecca McCog. A lot of things were discussed. Golf ended with a great year. They are now closed. They're working on the irrigation system. Things are going really well. No problems there. Working along just fine. Ice skating rink had great success. For the first time, it came close to really covering the cost itself, up quite a bit. Let's see what else there. So golf was good. There was a lot of programs going on right now. Numbers are up for just about everything, and everybody's really excited to talk about it. That was about it.
Great, thank you. Downtown District Committee?
Yes, the Downtown District Committee met on January 19th. Darren Peterson, Aaron Smith, and Pete Schwartz were present. Brian Aaron and myself were unable to be there. So I'm reading through the minutes, and if you have any questions, I'm going to encourage you to talk to one of the people that was actually at the meeting. But at the meeting, Mrs. Arnold talked about the Downtown Development Fund project, or the Downtown Development Project that we're working with DLZ to put together that plan, and that we need to appropriate funding from the Downtown Fund for that expenditure. And so more information on that downtown plan will be coming in the future weeks. And so we'll be reaching out not only to council members, but to key stakeholders in the community, as well as business owners and building owners. So be on the lookout for some communication from Kayla Arnold and the city of Noblesville. It wouldn't be a Downtown District Committee meeting if we didn't talk about streetlights, so they did talk about those, and so it's continuing to move forward. There you go. And alley activation continues to be ongoing, working on designs for archways, for potential murals, and just continue to move forward with that. And then again, much of the discussion was regarding the downtown project. So more of that will be to come later on.
Thank you. Finance Committee?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. Myself, Will Hampton, Greg O'Connor, and Megan Wiles met January 21st, and Andrew Murray discussed economic development with the Nexus of Noblesville Cityscape Project, and also the Washington Business Park with Patch Development. We had a 2020 review, revenue summary with Sam Bears, review of the 2020 actual revenue collections versus budget, and Mr. Spalding discussed some of the fiscal and related actions on the council meeting agenda, which we'll go over later tonight. The claims do come to the council with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? I should have asked if we have questions for any of the committee members about any of the. Thank you. Can I have approval of the claims? Motion to approve the claims?
Second.
It's a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you. We will move on to miscellaneous 1. Council to consider resolution RC 420, a resolution approving 1, a declaratory resolution and economic development plan for the redevelopment commission establishing the Nexus of Noblesville Economic Development Area, which such resolution removes certain property from the Noblesville redevelopment area, and 2, the order of the Plan Commission related thereto. Nexus project. Mr. Andrew Murray.
Good evening, President Peterson, members of the council, Andrew Murray, Economic Development Director for the record. This item before you, pretty straightforward request. It's one of multiple statutory steps in creating a new TIF allocation area, and this is specific for the Nexus project and our partnership with Cityscape Residential to redevelop the old marsh site on River Road. So recall back to your September meeting of last year where this council approved a development agreement in partnership with Cityscape. One of those commitments identified in that agreement included creating and carving out the project site into its own separate allocation area. And as you'll recall, the purpose for that is to capture the project's property taxes, tax increment that is generated from the project, and then we would pledge that back to the debt service on the developer purchase bond as part of the project. So procedurally, this started at the Redevelopment Commission where they passed the declaratory resolution. The Plan Commission issued its order. So the resolution before you is to ratify and confirm those actions. Then we'll go back to the RDC, confirm that, and hold the required statutory public hearing. So with that, I will stop there. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Murray?
Mr. President, I would move that we approve Resolution RC-4-21 as presented.
This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Miscellaneous number 2, council to consider acceptance of conflict of interest disclosure from Darren Peterson. This is a project we're going to see next. We've been working with one of the tenants that has narrowed it down in Hamilton County to this site. So we hope they land there, but that will make.
I have a motion to approve or accept the conflict of interest disclosure from Mr. Peterson.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you.
Moving on to item number 3, council to consider resolution RC 521, a resolution approving an economic development agreement with Patch Development LLC, Washington Business Park Project. Mr. Jensen.
Good evening, council. Mr. President, Chris Jensen, Mayor. It's great to be with you tonight. If you are a follower of local news, you'll know that this a few weeks ago we announced our support from the administration side for a new business park here in the city of Noblesville, and it is a partnership between the city of Noblesville and Patch Development. Patch Development is represented tonight by Pat Chittenden and Andrew Greenwood, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions that you would have about this project. Just to acclimate you, the location here is along the 37 corridor at 15193 Cumberland Road. It's a 75-acre parcel along State Road 37, like I said, on the east side of 37. And it's just north of 146th Street and south of Greenfield Avenue. What our plan is here is to master plan 75-acre business park and anticipating over 800,000 square feet of innovation and flex space over the next 5 years. This was a project that we've discussed a lot recently because we know that there is a need for this inventory here in the city of Noblesville. I was asked recently about how this project has changed or evolved in the era of COVID, and I think that's a very applicable question for any project we see. The great part of this project with this this development here with Washington Business Park is that we know that businesses are constantly, and certainly right now, taking an assessment of their workforce, taking an assessment of their footprint. This business park allows for a wide variety of square footage options here. So when we're talking about, as Mr. Peterson referenced earlier, we already have businesses looking heavily at this site. As they look for their new future home, we have the available options here for them in Washington Business Park. We anticipate over the next several years that we can attract upwards of 500 new direct jobs because of Washington Business Park, located, as I said, along the 37 corridor. So we are excited. Our plan is here tonight, pending your approval, to close on the TIF bond in April of this year and seek infrastructure improvement come May of this year with an estimated completion in 2022. Again, this allows for flexible office space ranging from 500 square feet all the way up to 250 square feet. and will be ready for occupancy in 30 to 60 days because we know that businesses are making changes on a dime to their business model. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll also invite up my good friend Chuck Haberman, who will cover the financial components of this in terms of incentives offered to patch development from the city of Noblesville. Any questions of me? I can hear John Ditzer saying that in my head, actually, for the past 4 years. With that, I'll turn it over to Chuck Haberman.
Good evening, Council. I'm Chuck Haberman. So the city will be issuing a developer-backed bond, anticipated in the amount of $6.6 million. We estimate about $5.5 million will be available to the developer for the infrastructure project in Phase 1 that Mayor Jensen shared. We'll be pledging 65% of the increment generated back into the project for the developer to use towards debt service, and 35% left over will be an annual split of that annual split will be returned back to the city. The bond proceeds will be supporting the infrastructure improvements, and those will include the extension of North Point Boulevard North, then 133rd Street into a roundabout, stormwater improvements for the property, and then 40% of the design of Cumberland Road improvements pending the next phase of the project. So next steps would be, assuming all goes to plan tonight, you can expect to see future requests for this project. Like Mayor Jensen said, everyone's very excited about this. We're tracking lots of leads for this property, and we hope to see it absorbed pretty quickly. So we request approval for this resolution, and it comes with a favorable recommendation from the Finance Committee. So, any questions?
Mr. President, I just had one, and we talked about this in finances, the factors as to why 153rd is not connected to Cumberland during this, several factors, and I'm not sure if it's a question to you, the administration, or to the developer. What are some of the reasons why that's not being completed now? I guess that's the question.
That's a good question that I don't have the answer to myself.
Perhaps? Thank you. I didn't want to try to
Alley to the rescue.
We just talked about it. I can't remember what we decided. Can you remember, Greg? What we
Evening,
talked?
Council. Ally Krupski, Engineering.
Thank you, Ally.
So 153rd is not connecting into Cumberland Road at this time because they do not plan on having access to Cumberland Road at this time. So they're going to use North Point Boulevard as their only access to get to their development. At such time, which we have laid out in our development agreement, that they reach a certain threshold where they will be required to provide that access, we will already be designing Cumberland Road so that they can come in and have that access ready at that point. So we're planning for it. It's just not going to happen up front with this first bond. So does that make sense? Or?
It does.
There are triggers outlined in the agreement for the completion of it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other infrastructure questions, or should I? All right, thanks.
Questions?
Just an observation, I think in conversation with Mr. Murray, I think our inventory in this type of space across the city is extremely low. In fact, it's negligible. So I think this project will go a long way to bringing additional jobs and bringing some new inventory into the city and continuing some growth in the industrial sector. So I guess having said that, I'll make a motion that we approve miscellaneous number 3, resolution RC-5-21.
Second.
Thank you. This is a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's 8-1 abstention. 0-1, I guess is the proper way to say that. Thank you. We'll move on to previously discussed ordinances. Council to consider ordinance 010121, an ordinance providing for the payment of availability and connection costs for developers and new users of the Noblesville sewage works as amended. Lindsay Bennett.
Good evening, Council. Lindsay Bennett, City Attorney. I just wanted to bring to your attention an amendment that was proposed on the effective date. The previous ordinance had, this kind of gets a little wordy, so I apologize, had exempted out developer agreements that were approved prior to today indefinitely. So any developer agreements that were approved by council prior to today in the previous ordinance would not have had to pay the new sewer availability fee. They would have paid the old sewer availability fee. It was brought to our attention that this included several old agreements that have not been completely built out, and so we didn't want to necessarily include every single agreement that still needed to be built out in that exemption, and also wanted to encourage development to move forward. And so the amendment will still exempt out those agreements, but only until April 1st of 2022, which is 1 year from the current effective date of April 1st, 2021. So to kind of restate that in different terms, any development agreement that was approved prior to today will start paying the new sewer availability fee April 1st, 2022. Anything approved after today will pay the new sewer availability fee April 1st, 2021. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. Like I said, we did the presentation, Jim Hellman, Engineering Department, did the presentation at last meeting. Didn't know if there was any questions that you had came up in the last 2 weeks or anything else that you would want me to address or clarify at this time.
I just want to comment, I really like the amendment because a lot of people have been sitting on a lot of property, and this is really a great way to spur on a little bit of development. I think that's really a nice amendment. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments?
President, I applaud you and Lindsay for all the work that you've done on this change, because we have not raised these rates in over 15 years. So it is an important time as we have future growth that we need to have those funds to fund the infrastructure needs for our community.
Thank you. It was me. I'm the one that faced in here, but there's many other people who helped out involved as well. So.
Take credit while you're standing there.
And Ray's in the back, so thanks, Ray.
If there are are there other questions? If there are no other questions, I would like to open the public hearing for ordinance 010121. Seeing no one come forward, I would like to move to close the public hearing for ordinance 010121.
Second.
And vote to close it. It is 9.
Mr. President, I would move that we amend ordinance 010121 as presented.
Second. This is also a hand vote. All those in favor of amending? 9-0.
President, I would then move that we approve ordinance 010121 as amended.
This is a roll call vote. Ms. Lees?
Mr. Ayers.
Aye.
Mr. Boyce.
Aye.
Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor. Mr. Schwartz.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles.
Aye.
Mr. Hampton.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
9 ayes, 0 nay. The ordinance is adopted.
Thank you. On to council to consider ordinance 020121 and ordinance adopting road impact fees as amended. Mr. Howard.
Yes, since your last meeting, we got some, just before your last meeting, we got some constructive comments from one of your members that made the ordinance clarify it a little bit and make it read a little easier. And we sent out a red line, and we do need to approve those amendments. In addition, similar to the sewer tap-on ordinance, we have allowed the new development to come in under the old rates if there is a development agreement in place by May 1st, 2021. But we also wanted to put a sunset behind that they would apply for the building permits within 1 year of the effective date, or August 1st. The idea being, while we want to allow our new corporate citizens to have the benefit of the analysis that they used in deciding to go forth with the project, we still don't want them to, for that bare land to lay there, and we want to have a motivation for them to go on and do that earlier. So to do that in the third to the last sentence in section 16, we need amendment for where we talk about, however, road impact fees assessed for any building permits described in a development agreement approved by the city council prior to May 1, 2021, and paid prior to August 1st, 2022, shall be assessed in the amount which would be in fact on the date of the ordinance, so the earlier one. With that, we would look forward to an amendment before incorporating those issues before passage. And Ms. Lees has a copy that has all of those changes in them. The notice of public hearing also did not include these amendments, but it included all the substantive issues in the prior ordinance. The impact fee analysis, which was the basis for the fees, the support for a maximum fee of $390 per trip, and the legislative establishment of a fee at $370 a trip. So with that, at the end of the public hearing or before, if you have a motion to amend as presented, then we'll be ready to move forward with the road impact fee ordinance. And I myself, or if it's technical, Mr. Hellman are here to answer any questions.
I will go ahead and open the public hearing for ordinance 020121. Sir?
Seeing no one from the public coming forward, I move to close the public hearing on 0201.
Second.
Hand vote to close it. All those in favor? 9-0.
President, I would move that we amend ordinance number 020121 as presented.
Second.
Also a hand vote. All those in favor of amending? 9-0.
Mr. President, I would move approval of ordinance 02-01-21 as amended.
Second. Sorry, fell asleep.
Please, it's a roll call vote.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
9 ayes, 0 nay. The ordinance is adopted.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council to consider ordinance 030121, an ordinance amending ordinance 150319 and updating the facade improvement grant guidelines as amended. Kayla Arnold.
Good evening, Council. Kayla Arnold, Economic Development for the record. The facade grant manual that I presented last week was amended to include, and I'll take out of Lindsay's playbook, it's a little wordy. Murals are eligible for a 50% reimbursement of total approved actual project costs up to a maximum of $2,500 per business or building owner for a $5,000 total project cost at the rate of $25 per square foot of artwork. Therefore, business and building owners are eligible for a reimbursement at $12.50 per square foot up to $2,500 for a $5,000 mural. That's listed in Exhibit B on page 16, based on the feedback from the previous council meeting, and we recommend that council approve the item as amended. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
Mr. President, I would move that we amend ordinance 03-01-21 as presented.
As a hand vote, all those in favor of amending, raise your right hand. 801.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve ordinance 03-01-21, sorry, as amended.
Is a roll call vote. Ms. Lees?
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor? Aye. Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Abstain?
Aye, one abstention. The ordinance is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council to consider ordinance 050121, an ordinance approving additional appropriation in the 1937 Fire Pension Fund for annual.
I got a couple of them up here.
What I do?
One.
Back to oh, I sure did.
04.
04. All right, we'll do these in the right order. Council to consider ordinance, sorry, 0401, sorry, Scott, I didn't mean to scare you. 040121, amendments to an adopted plan development ordinance known as Noble Creek Plan Development. Joyce Ann Yelton.
Good evening. Joyce Ann Yelton, Development Services Manager. As you may recall, this was an amendment to the Noble Creek Shops PD. It is specific to the Riverview Health. They're located at Cherry Street and Noble Creek Drive. It is to amend the plan to include a total of 14 parking spaces, 10 along Cherry Street and 4 along the western property line. This item did come to you with a favorable recommendation for adoption from the Plan Commission. And with that, I will ask if you have any questions of staff. If not, Scott Tripp from Riverview Health and Nathan Winslow with American Structure Point are in the audience if you have any questions of them.
Are there any questions?
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I would move that we approve ordinance 04-01-21 as presented.
Roll call vote, Ms. Lees?
Mr. O'Connor? Aye. Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Abstain?
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
8 ayes, 0 nay, 1 abstention. The ordinance is adopted.
Thank you.
Now, council to consider ordinance 050121, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the 1937 Fire Pension Fund for funding annual reporting costs. Mr. Spalding.
Yeah, Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, CFO and Controller, and as presented along the way many times, this is kind of the simplest of simple technical actions. It's appropriating additional funds in the 1937 Fire Pension Fund to pay for some costs that were excluded from the budget. And the nice thing about it is that the funds that you're being requested to appropriate all come from the state, and they can't be spent on anything else. So there's, not really much fiscal impact to the decision other than taking the action to authorize the appropriation of the funds to pay the required cost for the annual reporting analysis.
Questions for Mr. Spalding? I would like to open the public hearing for ordinance 050121.
Second?
It's a hand vote. All those in favor of closing the public hearing? 9-0. Approve the ordinance.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move that we approve ordinance 05-01-21 as presented.
Second.
Roll call vote, Ms. Lee.
Schwartz.
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Air?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
9 ayes, 0 nay, the ordinance is adopted.
Thank you. Council to consider ordinance 060121, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the 1925 Police Pension Fund for funding annual reporting costs. Mr. Spalding.
Yes, so take everything that I just said, remove 1937 Fire Pension Fund and replace those words with 1925 Police Pension Fund, and that's the explanation.
Are there any questions for Mr. Spalding? I'd like to open the public hearing for ordinance 060121.
President,
Yes.
seeing no one come forth, I would make a motion to close the public hearing.
Hand vote, all those in favor of closing the public hearing? Raise your right hand. 9-0. I have a motion to approve the ordinance.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve ordinance number 0601-21 as presented.
Second.
Roll call vote, Ms. Lees?
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Air?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
9 ayes, 0 nay, the ordinance is adopted.
Council to consider ordinance 070121, an ordinance providing additional appropriations in the general fund for funding the Small Business Resiliency Grant Program. Mr. Spalding.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, this additional appropriation does have a little substance to it, and you're aware of it. It's appropriating balances of funds that reverted in 2020 in the general fund to be able to pay for our second round of small business resilience grants. And basically, that summarizes the action, and you're familiar with what the program is.
Any questions for Mr. Spalding or Ms. Arnold still here?
President, I would ask that Ms. Arnold come up and just talk a little bit about the resiliency grants that we approved last year and the impact that that's had on businesses in our community.
Thank you.
Kayla Arnold, Economic Development. I gave an update in, I think it was August, went back and looked at my notes, regarding the spring 2020 Small Business Resilience Grants. So just kind of as a recap, with that, we were able to retain 183 full-time jobs at the reporting deadline, which was in June 30th, which was up from 114 full-time jobs in April that was reported from businesses. Part-time employment was up 60% from April 1st to when reporting was due on June 30th. And the majority of the businesses used the grant money to pay their overhead costs, such as rent, utilities, and maintaining payroll. One business was able to secure a PPP loan, and their business rebounded quicker and better than expected, so they did return the grant to the city. And a number of businesses used those funds to adapt swiftly, move to e-commerce, kind of revamp some of their business models, and have been very successful, and we hope to see that again in round 2. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I don't have a question, Mr. President. I just wanted to note there's a really good article in the Indy Star that talks about the first round that came out earlier in January that interviews a few of the businesses that is really good for those who haven't seen that yet.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll go ahead and open the public hearing for ordinance 070121.
Second.
And vote to close the public hearing. All those in favor? Is a roll call vote, Ms. Lees?
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton? Aye. Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor? Mr. Schwartz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
9 ayes, 0 nay, the ordinance is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot going on when Ms. Wiles gets to vote first on an item, so that was great to
First
see.
time in a long time.
A lot happening in the city. Are there any council comments?
Yeah, I will say something, Mr. President. I was, just I guess a thank you and a congratulations to our state leaders, our local administration. I was up in Michigan last week, and to walk down the road and see the entire place shut down, where restaurants were not allowing people inside, and I just really like the response from what our state has done locally here in Noblesville. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think these grants, sure, they'll step in and they'll help, but we're a pretty vibrant community right now. Noblesville's doing okay, and people are fighting the virus, and they're winning in many cases. Of course, some are not, and we pray for their families continually. But as a community on the business side, it has been pretty impressive what's been happening. So just thank you to all the state and local leaders.
Thank you. Any other council comments?
So moved. You don't really need
I don't?
No, just bang that thing.
All right.